Good morning. Here's a couple things that you'll do with this assignment. You're going to partner up with one other person near you, and between slides, you are going to pause and make sure that your partner understands what's going on and compare notes. There is a guided note sheet that goes with political parties, campaigns, and elections. And we're doing it this way because I had no choice but to be gone and we need to stay on schedule. So here we go. Let me remind you to keep your cell phones away and stay focused during this video. Make sure that you check in with your partner periodically as we move forward. There are a couple of videos that you'll be pausing my video here to watch, and the sub will help you with that. Thanks. So let's start simple. What is a political party? A political party is an organized group of people with similar political ideologies and goals, and they are also known as linkage institutions. Political parties are also known as linkage institutions because that is the link between the people who are electing an eventual candidate. And so we have to have a mechanism that creates a pathway to allow that to occur. So please check in right now with your partner and make sure that they have that down. You can pause the video. Okay, with this next section, you're going to need to pause this video and bring it up on a new screen and play the crash course number 41, Party Systems. Once the video has ended, make sure that you and your partner are good to go with its content, and I'll check in with you with respect to party realignment and re-emphasize a few things. Okay, welcome back to this portion of the slideshow. This is going to cover the function and impact of political parties. As you watched in the film, there are a variety of different things discussed with respect to what political parties are and how they operate. We'll also touch base with how things were realigned, and I'll discuss that in a moment. Okay, the first item on here is party as an organization. What that means is if you take your two major parties, the Republican versus Democratic Party, they're going to serve a particular role and purpose. They're also going to have a political platform, and their agenda is going to be very clear with respect to what they support and how they go about organizing and promoting their ideas. Here's a couple basics with respect to the Republican Party. They want smaller government. They would like to decrease taxes when possible in an effort to try and balance the budget. Less spending gives it that opportunity, and they tend to be more conservative with respect to allowing a lot of spending on social programs. If it were up to them, they would downsize the welfare program. They would possibly even try to eliminate it. In addition, they'd like to make adjustments to the Social Security platform and make it more individually based, and instead of an entitlement package, possibly changing the retirement age to 67. Something like that would make more sense. Because right now the Social Security program is just not sustainable, and so they're advocating for more of an individualistic approach, and therefore you'd have to save for your own retirement. But by and large, they're more conservative than the Democratic Party, and so let's talk about the Democrats for a second. The Democrats are one that will most of the time promote the social programs, especially the ones that were created in the mid-1960s under the Johnson administration. So we're talking about welfare, we're talking about Social Security platforms and its extension. Even though that was developed way back in the 1930s, there have been some changes to that. And so These guarantees allow senior citizens the opportunity to receive a paycheck after age 65 when you become eligible for Social Security. Those that work in the private sector do that. So Democrats do support sustaining that program. They also support the Medicare program, expansions of the Medicare program, which is senior citizen insurance, have helped seniors stay, how do we put this, well into their long years. By and large, the Democrats are going to try and lend a hand to the lower class in terms of economic help. And so they're going to be in favor of welfare programs. The second item on this slide refers to party in the electorate. What that means is when you are voting and you register to vote, you'll have an opportunity to select one of the major parties, either the Republicans or the Democrats. You also have the opportunity to remain as an independent, and you can also join one of the third parties like the Green Party or the Libertarian Party. So totally up to you. With respect to straight ticket voting, that means that from the top of the ballot, which would be the president and vice president, all the way down to local elections, straight ticket voting is staying right in line with your party that you chose. So if you're a Republican, then you'd vote entirely top to bottom Republican without a doubt. Split ticket voting is different because you might be analyzing and going back and forth from one party candidate to another. So Republican back to Democrat and vice versa. All the way down the ticket, it might look like you're going back and forth, but a lot of people do that because the qualifications of some candidates could come into question. Okay, party in government refers to making sure once you're elected as a congressman or senator and possibly even president that you stay true to your political party's platform, which is the agenda. So the things that I was describing earlier in terms of their policy platforms need to be adhered to. If you stray too far off course, it might mean that you can't win re-election if your constituents, the people who voted you into office, are not happy with your track record, so to speak. So you can't stray too far from the norm. Otherwise, you end up without a job the next time around an election comes. Recruiting and supporting political candidates is a huge job, and people are hired by both the Democratic and Republican sides to maintain their power in Congress, whether that's the House or the Senate, and possibly even try to win the presidency. So a lot of money is spent there, and supporting candidates is extremely expensive but meaningful. And the way they do that is by raising funds. That fundraising effort happens on a regular basis. If you become a congressman and you're elected into that spot, you're fundraising right away for the next election because it's only 2 years away and there's no term limits. You have an advantage if you are an incumbent. Please pause the video and make sure that your partner understands the last 3 items that were on the prior slide. Okay, let's emphasize a few points that were brought up during the party systems crash course. Craig was talking about some shifts in party coalitions and how things have changed over time. There are 2 main realignments that you need to be aware of. Many of the people who were prior Republican voters decided to shift allegiance during the New Deal to the Democratic Party. And many blue-collar workers decided to be more in favor of democratic or liberal politics, and they looked to those social programs that were started up to help lend a hand during that economic turmoil. The second realignment occurs during the civil rights movement. It's not mentioned on this slide, but it's worth mentioning. The white Democrats, known as Dixiecrats, who were supporting separate but equal and segregation in the South left the Democratic Party for good. You'll remember that time period where the longest filibuster in our nation's history occurs in the Senate over the Civil Rights Bill. They were trying to deny its passage. Anyway, that happened, and a lot of white Southern Democrats left the Democratic Party for good and are now aligned solely with the Republicans. This is why the Republican Party remains a stronghold in the South today. The last realignment occurs and adjustments were made where the Democrats lost some support during both President Trump's first win in 2016, where he won many of the Rust Belt states. We'll look at that on a map in a few. And again, it happened in the 2024 election. So realignments have happened and adjustments are made, usually over economic issues with the prior administration. An example of a recent adaptation or change in political party agendas could be seen in what the current Biden administration is trying to do with respect to problems on our nation's immigration platform and increasing border security, using the National Guard, for example, to beef up security at our nation's border. But arguably none of that has really helped the situation. And so this was one of the main issues that plagued the Biden administration, and the Harris campaign never really had a chance as a result to recover those kinds of things. Even bipartisan bills that were discussed in Congress and set to take the shape of a new law and really make headway with immigration were never able to pass through Congress as a result of President Trump's influence on blocking that agenda from occurring and not giving President Biden a win during that last year of his term. So take a moment to review and make sure that your partner understands the three main party coalition shifts that were discussed on this slide. Okay, once we get going here, again, we've got a new slide called the two-party system. The two-party system versus proportional representation system are different ways that various democracies across the world operate. When you look at single-member plurality system, this type of voting platform is akin to, say, Germany, for example. They use this where various political parties try to gain support, and during the election cycle, let's say if they win 31% of the overall vote, they get 31 out of 100 seats. And so they have a large stake, but they're not the majority party. And that's the way they operate. You also see a different system across the world called a winner-take-all system. India, the United Kingdom, France, and the United States and Canada are all really good examples of a winner-take-all system. This is different because it's akin to our electoral college and how that operates. Remember that on a state-by-state basis, if you win the popular vote in your state, you get all of the electoral college votes or points, and you need 270 to win. So it's just describing that there are two different ways that you can elect political representatives for your working Republican democracy. Third parties play a very critical role in helping shape politics and new agenda items in the United States system of government. The way they operate is they bring up certain issues. You could think Green Party for environmental policies, as well as consumer protectionism. Those kinds of things have occurred over time. If it wasn't for third-party candidates like Ralph Nader making a big stink about seat belts and the importance of them in the 1970s, we would never have mandatory seat belts in cars. The other items that are pretty obvious with respect to the environment surround how climate change has become a pretty big issue, yet not a whole lot of major change has occurred in terms of government regulation. It keeps going back and forth between each Republican versus Democratic term in the presidency. And so it looks like things are going to get a little more conservative, seeing the shift with the recent changes and nominees for the cabinet positions of the incoming President Trump. The third-party candidate in 2016 for the Green Party had an impact on the results in some of the Rust Belt states where that political candidate was able to get 1 or 2% of the vote in some of those critical states, and this kept those votes going toward candidate Hillary Clinton, and it cost her the election because all of those states went to Trump. So please take a moment and double check with your partner that you have the last two slides handled, the two-party system and the third-party system, and how third parties operate. Okay, let's switch gears to presidential elections and find out how that whole process operates. Phase 1 is known as the nomination process. Before any campaign can begin, you have to create an exploratory committee and start raising funds for your campaign. If you don't have money to get started, then your media and ad campaign can't even get off the ground. So it's critical that the presidential candidate has enough resources to even get started. During the nomination process, the goal in mind is to seek support of the delegates. These are people who are going to vote at the National Convention. In order to gain those delegates, you need to win primary and caucus races throughout that schedule, and we'll look at the schedule in just a few minutes. It's important for you to gain that support because eventually there's going to be a national convention, and that political party will eventually pick their nominee, the single person that will run in the general election against the other major party. So both the Democrats and the Republicans have a national convention. The term front-loading is best seen on this map right here. The Democratic primary schedule falls right in line with the Republican schedule as well. But what this means is certain states are going to have their primary race earlier in the calendar year for a general election that comes up. So you can see that in February, key states like Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, and Nevada all have their primary race early in the process. And then others fall in line, like on Super Tuesday, 16 different states marked in blue, including California and Texas and North Carolina, all have their primary race on that second Tuesday of February. And then many in March, April, May, and the last ones in June, as you can see. As far as delegates go, you can see that each state has a certain number of Democratic candidate delegates that will be coming into play when voting takes place at the National Convention. The Democratic National Convention usually happens in mid-August of an election year, and this year it was in Chicago in 2024, and this is where they elected Kamala Harris to be their Democratic candidate. That's just an example of how that works, and there is a voting process where that candidate needs to reach a nomination number of 1,991. That's determined by half the total delegates available across the entire country, and so you can see how many are existing in each state. And it varies by population size, and California has the largest. There are tie-breaking procedures if neither candidate that is in consideration wins the majority support of those delegates. And so they have what's known as super delegates, and these are usually the more experienced delegates from each state, and they earn that classification based on their involvement over the course of many years. And so there are 771 superdelegates, and they're the only ones that would vote in the second round if there's a contested convention. So to break that tie, so to speak. Republicans use the national campaign process as well, and they have a total number of 2,550 delegates. So that means you need 1,276, which is 50% plus one, in order to win the nomination. And so over the last 3 cycles, that candidate was Donald Trump, and he was able to get the majority of those delegates without a problem. He's definitely helped reshape a more conservative approach to American politics and made the Republican Party even more right-leaning than it used to be. The Republican convention does not use superdelegates. They do not have any need for them. It's never become an issue as far as choosing the single candidate for them to have run for the general election. Please take a moment and pause here and check in with your partner and make sure that you guys are on the same page. Once you're done checking in with your partner, let's move on to phase 2 of a presidential election and talk about the election process and how that operates. The goal is to win 270 electoral college votes. By now we know the formula on how to determine a state-by-state electoral college vote count. The focus during an election is really on the battleground or swing states. And in the last election in 2024, there were 7 different states, and that's where the bulk of advertising money was spent because the race was going to be really close in those states. Moving on, this electoral college results map shows you the electoral college voting results in every election since 1824, and as it cycles through you can see how the colors change. Sometimes it results in a landslide victory for one party versus the other, or sometimes they are hotly contested elections. Let's do a quick comparison of the last 3 election results from 2016, 2020, and 2024. Here you can see that Hillary Clinton versus President Trump resulted in a 304 to 227 victory for Donald Trump. The main results occur through here in the Rust Belt, with Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania and Ohio all going to President Trump. This would flip in 2020 when President Biden had roughly the same margin of victory, where he was able to get those Rust Belt states back on his side, with Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania being keys to his victory. He also won Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. That is not the case with respect to the 2024 election results, where Vice President Kamala Harris was unable to sustain that type of momentum that the Biden administration did, arguably over economic policies that changed people's minds. And President Trump won re-election here in 2024, and he will start his new term in January of 2025. You can see that he won all 7 of the battleground states. Those are Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. The victory was a 312 to 226. Remember, you need 270 to win, so he was able to do that. And according to Republican pundits, they would say that that is a landslide victory. Let's cap off our discussion of elections with how congressional and Senate elections operate. remember that each congressional district has its own representative across the entire state and will make up a total of 435 different members of the House of Representatives. All House seats are done on a majority basis with the popular vote in their congressional district, so 50% plus one vote would win that. And usually that's the case in a hotly contested congressional seat. So the Republicans, for example, remain in control of the House of Representatives during the upcoming Congress in 2025, whereas the Senate flipped from Democratic to Republican control, and those Senate seats are now at a 53 to 47 majority for Republicans in the Senate. House seats are up for grabs every 2 years, so those are 2-year term, and the midterm election refers to that 2-year cycle. Every 2 years, an entire House of Representatives slate needs to be reelected. That is different than the Senate. You need to understand that 1/3 of the Senate seats are up for election every 2 years, and so they cycle a 6-year term. So that means that you're never going to have an entire 100 senators elected during one midterm or general election. They rotate every 6 years. Lastly, the incumbency advantage phenomenon refers to the person who held office before usually wins re-election unless it's over ethical issues that occur, and sometimes the constituents lose faith in their prior candidate, but overall they do find an advantage. So that, again, that means whoever held the office before is known as an incumbent, and they have an advantage to win re-election because there are no term limits in Congress. Okay, you're going to pause right here and go back over that with your partner and talk about congressional elections and how they operate. This ends part 1 of this slideshow, and so you're going to pause here and then switch over to campaign finance, so take a little break.